Welcome out to our Momentum Mindset Monday. Good to see many people on the call, and we'll go ahead and just kind of jump into this in our conversation today. So we typically talk a lot about this idea of building momentum and ways of setting up momentum and be able to build that in your business, and how can you get that going for you overall. And today, the topic that kind of came to me over the weekend as I was thinking about what to talk about and what to highlight, there were a couple things, but the main one that I was thinking of was this idea of intention. And when you're looking at intention, there are a lot of thoughts that kind of come to mind in that of what are you have, like, we start off Mondays, and I put a little post on Facebook this morning that you start off with this idea of intention of what you want to do. So Monday's a typical day of great intention. You'll have the start of the day when you wake up and you're ready to go, and you have like these different thoughts and ideas of what you want to do. And at the beginning of the day, you typically have the highest amount of intention. At the beginning of the week, and sometimes at the beginning of the month. And we're coming up to the beginning of the year, which is probably the one day that we have the most intention of what we want to do and what we want to accomplish. And if that's the case, then we start to look at it and say, okay, well, how do we capture it? How do we achieve the intention that we want? Because if we start to look at intention, the idea is, how do we start to capture that and get to where we want to go? So let's talk a little bit about that. I love this quote by Aristotle, and it's very simply that excellence is never an accident. It's always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. So if that's the case, like if we're starting to look at achieving excellence and getting where we want to go, there are a lot of different things that start to come up and start to play out. And this idea of intention really starts to become something where we're trying to get clear, we're trying to get a laser focus, we're declaring our intentions, we're trying to get to where we want to go. So you have this idea, this concept of, okay, this is where I'm at right now, and I know this intention of what I want to accomplish or where I want to go. And our intention starts to create our reality. Because where we want to get to, we already have this preconceived idea of what we want to achieve. And we're trying to accomplish this piece. But what I've found over time is that oftentimes our intention and our result is so different. So we get this idea of where we want to go, but then we get stuck, and then all these different things that get in the way of getting to where we want to end up. So if that's the case, then how do we get to the place where we're trying to go? So the concept that I want to talk a little bit about today is this idea of intention creates tension. And if we're going to have greater opportunity to capture our attention, we want to be in tension. And what I mean by that is, so you're going to be in a place, and we're all in these places, where we have our comfort level, where we're currently at. So we have this comfort level, and we live our life based upon our habits and our actions, what we're used to doing. And then oftentimes our intention is to do something that's more than what we've been doing in the past. And that creates some sort of tension. So if I were to challenge you on this call and say, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to have 20 new conversations today. I want you to go and talk to 20 people that you haven't talked to in the past, or 20 people that don't even know you're in real estate, and have 20 conversations today. And if I challenged you to that, and you might say, well, I don't want to do 20 calls. Well, if the reward is big enough, then you would do it. If I said, okay, well, I'll give you $1,000 to do this. So you give $1,000 to talk to 20 people, or whatever the price tag is that would make you want to do it, it's still going to create some inner tension. It's still going to start to create something internal where you're like, oh, like I want to, but I also don't want to. Like I actually don't want to at all, but I also want the results of doing it. And that's that internal tension that we're trying to create. And I would say that the more that you find yourself in that space, where you can find yourself feeling stretched and feeling like you're getting pulled, then you're going to find yourself catapulted into the direction that you want to go. So it's just like a slingshot, that you're pulling back and you're trying to create tension to be able to accelerate past your current norms. And so finding tension is a critical part of this process, and you're trying to look into it. So, I mean, we've talked about this in the past, and that is that most likely the most important thing that you need to do in your business is the one thing that you don't want to do the most. Like that's the thing that is the game changer for your business, is the one thing that is the most unexciting, or the most fear-ridden, or the most stressful thing that you can come up with. Like that is the thing that'll make the biggest difference for you. And it creates a lot of tension to get to that place. So I'm going to share with you 3 keys to realizing your intention. So as you're looking at that, you're starting to say, okay, well, I do want to do this thing. So you're saying it out there, you're putting it out to the world, you're putting it out to the universe, saying, okay, I want to accomplish something, but how do I do that? Well, let's step into that. So here are the 3 keys. The first thing is principles. You've got to have, and when I'm talking to you, I'm talking about all of us, and that includes me, we have to have principles that are solid and steadfast. In fact, rules are not necessarily sacred, but principles are. Now, we've talked a lot about principles as a company. We talk about our principles. We talk about our core values, and our core values of page, passion, authenticity, inclusion, growth, and excellence. Like those are values, and we have our principles that are backed behind them. And so our principles become the bedrock and the foundation upon which we build. And so as you start to look at this, you start to say, okay, well, I need to have principles of who I am and what I do and what do I accomplish, and I have to have principles of what I stand for. And if you don't have principles, it's going to be really hard to create tension, because there's nothing to stick the flag in. Like you've got to have, if you're going to build a catapult that's going to launch you forward, you got to have a sure foundation to stick your catapult in to launch you forward. And the principles are the bedrock upon which you can build the foundation of where you want to go. So that becomes the foundation, the principles that you have. So you have these core principles, and they might be things like, I would say that there are probably some standard processes around that. If you don't get your principles, you might say, well, one of my principles is that I have high integrity with all my clientele. You might have one of my principles that I've always had is I only work with people that I like. That's something that I developed many years ago. And that's a core foundation of who I am in my business. And so it pushes me a little bit, because I have to find ways of liking people that I might not intentionally like in the beginning. But if I find someone that I don't resonate with, that I feel that they are disingenuous and they're not the quality of person I want to work with, then that's a decision that I have to make. That's a principle that I have. Now, principles will lead us into the next phase. And the second thing that is going to push us to get to where we want to go with our intention are standards. Now, this is one of the challenges that an agent will have when they start into the business, because when you start getting into real estate, it's not very clear what standards you can have and what standards you should adopt in your real estate business. Now, I would say standards are going to be, there's multiple different ways of looking at standards. And one of the core things with your standards are you being able to set boundaries, both within your own life and within the way your clients will work with you and how you work with your clients. It is setting the framework of what the client relationship looks like with you, with standards. So the idea of standards really comes down to is having high standards protects you from low quality experiences. This is the thing with standards. Like when you start to look at it, like we're right now in our industry are seeing the fallout of having various standards. Like we're seeing that, we'll talk a little bit more on our town hall meeting tomorrow about the lawsuit and kind of the fallout of that. But a lot of that comes down to varying standards across the board. Standards that are different from state to state. Standards that are different from agent to agent. There are different standards that people are holding how they work with their clientele. And when you start to look at your own life, it's going to be critical, because in the end, we can say whatever standards we want to say, but it always comes down to what we tolerate. You see, you have this line that you draw across, and it becomes the standard of where you're going to be running your business at. It becomes what the standard is when you work with your clientele. But then there's the gap, and the gap is what we tolerate. So you have the standard of what you say you will accept, but then you tolerate something different. And that gap between what we tolerate and what we have as our standard or our said standard, that just creates frustration. And oftentimes it's like a frustration that is maybe kind of pushed out to the marketplace. Like we get frustrated with other people, but really the frustration is with ourselves because we accepted something different than we know what we should have done. We've all done this. If you've been in the business for any amount of time, you have made adjustments to your standards. We've all done it. It's the person who says, well, I'm only going to work with clients that sign a buyer broker agreement with me. And we do that for a while until we don't do it with that one client or the close friend or the neighbor or the person that we have a good relationship with, our high school friend, whatever it is. And then we get burnt because something happens, it goes sideways and we weren't protected and we didn't sign the contract and we knew that we should have, but we didn't, and we're frustrated. And our frustration is externally with that person, but really it's because we tolerated something different than what our standard was. And I speak from that because I've done the same. Every single person has had different instances where they have tolerated something different than their standard. And then there's this regret and there's this like feeling of like, oh, I knew better than that. I know better than that. I'm not going to do that again. And I would say that in our real estate journey, we are continually going to be reminded of things to get us to where we want to go. I think it's funny because I hear often people say, well, a lot of stuff that we talk about in classes and in masterminds and in trainings, it all like starts to sound the same. Yeah. After a while, yeah, it does. I wouldn't say it's a broken record. It's just, all it is just repeating the things that we need to hear over and over and over. My coaches and the people that I mentor with and the people that I pay to consult me and to be like a coach in my life, it's not like they're teaching and training stuff that I haven't heard before. It's not like they're like sharing some sort of revolutionary thing that has like, this is the first time I've ever heard it. No, mostly it's going back to the core fundamentals and reconfirming my standards. Because what I find is that as I'm stretching and getting into tension, it is actually pulling me. And sometimes that pull makes me question the standards that I've held. And it also makes me question, am I able to hold a higher standard at this point? Because it's really easy to fall back on old standards. It becomes really hard when you start to push your standards up. It's hard to the fact that you're worried about fallout. At least that's what I am. I'm worried about what could happen if I raise the standards. And what if people are willing to accept those new standards? Well, the third key to pushing past your attention and getting to where you want to go is skill building. And this is a difference maker for a lot of people. It's this harnessing the willingness and the desire and having the grit to continually skill build and become a better version of you. I love this quote by Michael Jordan, and it is, my best skill was that I was coachable. I was a sponge and aggressive to learn. How many of you can say that in your own business? Like, do you find yourself in the real estate business that you're coachable, that you're a sponge, that you're aggressive to learn, or are you going to stay where you've always been at? And there's nothing wrong with staying where you're at. It's just understand that that's a commitment you've made to stay where you're currently at. But I love the thought that one of the greatest athletes of all time, the greatest basketball player of all time, remain coachable. I mean, if you really want to read some fascinating books, his coach or his personal trainer, Tim Grover, wrote a couple of books. The first one is called Relentless, and that's fascinating to see kind of the unpacking of high-level performers and what that takes to engage in that level of complexity. So Relentless is a powerful book, and the second book that he just released maybe a year or so ago called Winning is a really good follow-up to that. But here are the 10 steps to building skill. It's pretty simple. You begin, you practice, you keep showing up, you practice some more, you stretch yourself, you're practicing, you do some more practice, you start to recognize and note your improvement, you practice some more, and you continually repeat. That's it. It comes down to practicing, showing up, acknowledging what you're doing, stretching yourself, writing down your improvement to be able to track it, and then continually going back and back and back. And I would say that the top performers in our country, when it comes to real estate, they've adopted this mindset. They're continually improving, even in a market as it shifts and adjusts. As we wrap this up on today's discussion, I want to just remind you that as you push yourself and you start to create tension in your life and in your business, for every level, there's another devil. And what I mean by that is you will learn and encounter new hards that you haven't come across yet. And you got to embrace that. It's like a video game. When you get to the next level, at the end of whatever level you're on, you're going to get the new bad guy or the new challenge you have at the end of the board That's the next devil that you have to now conquer. And every time you move your business forward, it's not that it becomes easier, it becomes actually harder because you're getting into a new hard. You move into the next hard and the next hard. And for other people outside, they might look at it and think, that doesn't look too hard. It is, for us, our biggest hard. For every one of us, we come across our biggest hard every time we push to the boundary what we're used to getting to. So, cool. Our final quote today is, the greatness of a man is not in how much wealth he acquires, but in his integrity and his ability to affect those around him positively. Every one of you has a chance to be a leader. Every one of you is a leader. You're a leader in your own lives, in your own families, and the people in your community, and to your clientele. You are stepping into leadership, and your leadership impact is going to be directly a correlation to your ability to impact those around you.